Then I went again.
Well, he said spiritual dimension.
How precious and how important the world was, and I became a family.
Everyone else was astonished.
Rabbi Joseph Telushkin is a rabbi, lecturer, and best-selling author. His father, Shlomo Telushkin, served as the accountant for Merkez Linyonei Chinuch, the educational arm of Chabad Lubavitch.
My father had a lot of nachas, a lot of pleasure from his career as an accountant. He never made a tremendous amount of money. He always made enough. We always lived well. But his pleasure derived from the fact that he worked for organizations that he felt passionately attached to. Chabad, he had a very strong feeling for, but he was also a Mizrahi because my father was a Zionist. He also was the accountant for the revisionists and for an organization called Ezra Torah headed by Rav Henkin, which helped Talmidei Chachamim who were in need. So he had a lot of pleasure from the work he was doing. But as he got older, he started gradually to semi-retire and gave up his other accounts. The only account he always kept was the account for Chabad and Merkaz. And in 1986, I at the time was living in Israel, and I got a phone call from my mother that my father had had a stroke. And I immediately flew back. And my mother had somewhat underplayed how serious it was. She just said to me I should come home immediately, but not wanting to make me even more nervous. My father really at first was hovering between life and death, and he was not conscious for several days. And I came back, and every day we would get 2 phone calls, usually from Rabbi Krinsky from the office. The Rebbe wants to know how your father is, and I would report it. And then on maybe the second day or so that I was back, my father came out of his unconsciousness. He was still in ICU in the intensive care unit, and he was a little befuddled. It was, in a sense, my father at the time was 80, and it was very sad. He had always been in very good health, and as I said, he was continuing his work as an accountant, and he always had great pleasure. On Shabbos, he used to give a weekly shiur in Talmud. And my father's life, to some extent, was like a person running full speed ahead who runs into a brick wall. Because all of a sudden, in one day, he could no longer do his work, and he really couldn't learn in any systematic way. His mind would go in and out of being confused, but we would continue to get these calls twice daily. And then one day, about 5 days after my father had come out of his unconsciousness, I pick up the phone, and it was Rabbi Krinsky. And this time, though, he has a question. The Rebbe has an accounting question for your father. So I said to him, but Rabbi Krinsky, you know how sick my father is? And he said, yes, we had a meeting of the leadership today, and an accounting issue came up, and the Rebbe said, ask Shlomo. And, we said, we mentioned your father's illness, and the Rebbe said, I know, ask Shlomo. And so at that point, of course, I took down the question exactly as it was posed. I brought it in to my father, and he was able to answer it. And this was an extremely moving event for me, because I realized there was the Rebbe in his office in Brooklyn with tremendous responsibilities for many things all over the world. And he was thinking about my father's situation, lying there in a hospital bed, probably feeling fairly useless. And he came up with a question that my father was able to answer. And I know it immediately made my father feel much better. I mean, my father looked at me and he said, yeah, do this, this, this. And this had an enormous impact on me, this incident, because it's what really made me aware to a remarkable extent of the Rebbe, who had assumed these international leadership roles and yet remained focused on the individual.